If you want to start a podcast this year, but you have no idea where to start, you're in the right place. The reality is that most people get stuck overthinking things like gear, editing, thumbnails, and platforms. And usually those are the reasons why your podcast never really gets published in the first place. So in the next 10 minutes or so, I'm going to show you a simple, beginner-friendly 5-step system to go from idea to an actual podcast episode. No studio, okay? No complicated technology and no expensive setup. Hey, I'm Caleb. For 7 years, I have been the co-owner and the content producer for Impulsive Podcast, Logan Paul's podcast, and I've been helping that podcast grow to over multi-millions of subscribers and followers and over 8 billion views in my time there. And if you want to learn my 8 billion view system, I put together a free podcast course and a guide that actually walks through everything from idea to distribution. So the link is in the description for that, but let's dive in with the video. Step 1 is that I want you to clarify your idea. Most people start by worrying about the name, the logo, and what mic they should choose. That can all wait. If the idea is very clear, then everything usually gets a lot easier. A good podcast idea needs clarity on 2 things. First one is who it's for, and then the second one is what it helps them do. I want you to use this one simple sentence. This show helps who go from problem to result. So let me show you an example of what that would actually sound like in real life for a podcast. If your niche, for example, is in something like real estate, it might sound something like this. This show helps first-time homebuyers go from confused to confident. And if you're in a niche like fitness, it could almost sound something like this. This show helps beginners go from not knowing what to do to feeling extremely confident in the gym. Or maybe if you're talking to a slightly older audience, it could be something like this show helps people over 40 go from low energy to feeling strong again. Quick check. If you can't say it in one sentence, it's likely a little bit too broad. Narrow down the avatar and then narrow down the problem. And once that sentence is clear, you have your direction. Now you just need a simple plan for what to actually say. So here's step number 2. I want you to write a script or write an outline. This is the thing though, you don't need to script every single word, but you need to do structure. Otherwise you'll just be rambling. So here, let me give you a simple outline that works for solo and full interviews. I want you to start with the hook, just first 10 to 30 seconds to really pull them in. Then tell them what they're going to actually get from today, like the exact result or lesson. And then after that, explain why it matters so they actually continue to care about what you are talking about. Now you teach the content into 3 parts or 3 points or 3 chapters. And then at the end, you land the plane with one clear takeaway, the one thing that you want the audience to remember. If you're interviewing people, don't start by writing 30 questions. Instead, start by writing an arc. Start by writing a little bit about their origin story. You could say something like, walk me back, from the beginning. When did this kind of start working from you? Don't make it maybe as bland as that, juice it up a little bit, but that's kind of how you need to start. Tiptoe your foot into the water. Then that's where you really start going into like the middle part. The middle part is a little bit more of asking about the hard parts. When it got messy, when did you get something wrong? What was the lesson that you learned from that? And finish with the end. What did you learn by going through all of that? And then maybe even like, what would you tell somebody who's going through it right now? And yeah, the exact questions change based on whatever guest you have, but your job tends to always be the same. You want to create moments. You want to create real stories, real tension, and a real lesson, because that is actually what turns into viral clips. Cool. Now you're not guessing. Now you actually have a little bit more of a structure. Step number 3 is recording your podcast. Here is the truth. In the beginning, your setup matters way less than your consistency. Here are 3 things that can improve your sound instantly. First is that you're gonna wanna get close to the mic. We're talking about a fist away. Second is that you're gonna wanna record in a soft space. You want fewer walls that are gonna bounce things off and create a very harsh echo in your content. You want things maybe on the walls or around the walls that actually absorbs it so there is no echo. Third is that you're gonna wanna turn off any noise. We're talking about fans, AC, anything that hums. Now, just keep the gear simple. simple. Pick one path. Option A could be your phone. And if you want a small upgrade, you can use wired earbuds or maybe like a lav mic. Option B is something like a USB mic. This is still kind of on easy mode. You can basically just plug it straight into your computer, open the recording app, hit record, boom, you're good to go. Option C is, to be honest, a little bit more of an upgrade later. This is a fancy Shure mic where you got an XLR running and you got all this kind of fancier-ish setup, but you're not at that point yet. Once you have the consistency down and you know that you're actually gonna stick with podcasts and for a long period of time, then you can start to upgrade your equipment. Your episodes at this point don't need to be polished and perfect. They just need to be finished. You really just need 1 or 2 episodes to really hammer to yourself, I can do this. And if you're doing remote interviews, here's the move. You're gonna wanna use a tool to record that actually records internally and the audio stays extremely clean so you can actually get separate tracks. Something like Riverside or maybe even Descript can do a great job at doing something like this when you have a recording like that. That way, editing later is gonna be way easier. Now, if you're recording video, I want you to make sure that you're not overcomplicating that either. The easiest setup is the 2-camera setup. We're talking about one on you and then one on the guest. If you have a third camera, you can make it a wide shot of both, but like that's not crazy necessary. I want you to think about the biggest podcast in the world still to this day. Joe Rogan, all he does, got a camera on the guest and then a camera on him. That's it. Every once in a while, he'll go to like the wide shot, but very rarely. He's only going with those 2 shots. And I also want you to make sure that you're keeping your framing somewhat close. And part of the reason is not only is it better to engage somebody, especially since they're on mobile, sometimes it's pretty far away, but it's also a lot easier to make clips out of. So if I was you kind of stemming off something like that, I would make sure that every single podcast is recorded in at least 1080p, but 4K is obviously preferred, but you don't have to let that slow you down. All right, now that your podcast is ready, let's start really hashing it out and tightening it up with some editing. Step number 4 is gonna be editing for clarity and not perfection. I want you to remember this. Editing is not about making you sound perfect. Editing is about making it easy for somebody to listen to. So what you can do with that to help out with that is cutting anything that drags, possibly confuses somebody, or makes people want to click away. And one of the easiest beginner workflows right now is transcript-based editing. You literally edit an episode like a document. You delete a sentence and the audio deletes with it. Here's a simple edit checklist. I want you to cut very long pauses, possibly dead air, maybe even cut rambling points of you or the guest kind of just straying away from the topic. Maybe even tighten the intro so you get to the point that much faster. And then keep stories and examples because that is what people mostly remember. Also make sure to level your volume so your audio stays consistent. And then 2, you can always use AI shortcuts. Okay, things like Autopod is a great and easy way to edit a beginner podcast. And then also something else like Auphonic is gonna be something pretty solid if the audio maybe in your room isn't up to par. One tip that usually saves beginners a lot of time is making sure that you're not editing it all at one time. And in the first pass, maybe you just cut the obvious stuff. In the second pass, maybe you do a quick audio and volume check, then stop. And honestly, you just probably need to publish it. And once your edit is clean, you can add music if you want, but you really don't need it. If you do use music, make sure to keep it simple and royalty-free, properly licensed tracks only, to be honest, but make sure to not borrow any like copyrighted tracks. It's fine for shorts, but like long form content, not great. And just even for a few seconds, because a lot of the time it'll get flagged and you don't want that for your podcast. Even if it's not monetized just yet, you'll eventually get to the point where it is monetized and then you won't be able to monetize it because it is copyrighted content. Once it is clean and consistent, the only thing left to do is publish it everywhere to get everybody to listen. So step number 5 is publishing and distributing. Publishing honestly is way more simple than you think. You only need 2 things, okay? You have a cover art and then you have a podcast host. For your cover art, like you don't need to overcomplicate it. Like keep it simple, make sure it looks good as a square, make sure you're using the right dimensions that these podcast hosting platforms say, and then make sure it's still readable even from far away because a lot of people are gonna be looking at it on mobile. Now let's talk about the host. Think of the host as like your podcast's home. This is where you upload the episodes, and this is where it gives you an RSS feed that gets put out to everybody. The RSS feed is basically what sends it out to Spotify and Apple and podcasts everywhere else. So here are a few beginner-friendly options depending on whatever you want. I'll throw a lot out here for you. First off, if you want a free, straightforward concept, use Spotify for Creators. I'm also very familiar with Art19 and SoundStack. I feel like they're pretty good as well. But I've also heard things like Substack is a solid option if you want a podcast plus a newsletter, as well as something like Buzzsprout if you want a little bit more of a traditional host with a strong beginner support. Truthfully, don't overthink it. Just pick one and upload and let the RSS feed do all the work. All right, here's the bottom line. You really just need to make sure that you're doing one thing, and that is publishing one episode. It doesn't need to be perfect, it just needs to be finished. Okay, don't get stuck on researching a whole bunch of gear. Don't get stuck within the whole editing loops. Get one episode live and then improve as you go. And if you want a little bit more help, drop a comment, tell me what kind of podcast you are starting and what your topic is. And then make sure to watch the next video to learn the simple podcast strategy that helps your episodes perform better and takes your show to the next level.